Sagittarius. Something life-changing will happen this weekend, and it will shake you to the core. You've always been the seeker, the one who runs toward the unknown with an open heart and unshakable faith. But lately, haven't you felt a quiet trembling beneath your feet? As if something unseen is gathering on the horizon, asking you not to run this time, but to stay still and listen? There is something sacred approaching. Not gentle, not soft, but necessary. A spiritual storm designed not to destroy you, but to awaken the part of you that's been asleep far too long. The truth is, what's coming this weekend may shake you deeply. It may ask you to let go of what you thought was stable, certain, even sacred. And yes, it may hurt. But please hear me, this is not a punishment. This is an initiation, a divine recalibration, a cleansing so precise, so intentional, that it could only have been authored by the universe itself. I'm Sophia, your guide at Zodiac Wisdom, and I'm not here to give you vague affirmations or glittery promises. I'm here to hold space for the raw, beautiful transformation your soul is about to undergo. If you feel something already stirring, if your heart beats a little faster and your spirit whispers, "This is for me," then stay with me. What I'm about to share may help you walk through the fire not with fear, but with sacred purpose. Before we begin, take a deep breath. Feel your center. And if this message resonates along the way, I lovingly invite you to like, share, and subscribe, not just for the algorithm, but as a soul signal that you're ready to walk this path with courage. Are you ready, Sagittarius? Let's begin. Gate 1. When everything falls apart, something greater is being built. Sagittarius, let's be honest. You are not afraid of the unknown, at least not in the way others are. You're wired to explore, to leap before you look, to trust the wide open road. But what happens when it's not you choosing the leap, but life pushing you into the free fall? What happens when your inner compass goes quiet, and everything that once felt certain begins to unravel? That's what this weekend may bring. You see, the universe has a strange way of loving us. Sometimes it brings blessings wrapped in beauty. Other times it sends blessings wrapped in chaos. For you, Sagittarius, the coming days may feel like a breakdown, but what's really happening is a breakthrough in disguise. You might wake up and realize the relationship you've been fighting for is already over spiritually. Or the job you thought was your dream starts to feel like a trap. Or maybe it's something less dramatic, but just as unsettling. A subtle, aching emptiness in a life that looks successful from the outside, but feels hollow inside. This is not a random collapse. It's sacred architecture. Let me tell you a story. Jacob, a Sagittarius from Vermont, spent 5 years climbing the corporate ladder. He had the six-figure salary, the condo, the perfect girlfriend. But one December weekend, everything cracked. His partner admitted she felt nothing. His company announced layoffs. And to top it off, a health scare forced him to stop, rest, and reflect. For 2 days he spiraled. Panic, grief, rage. He thought he was losing everything. But that was the weekend he found his soul. He sat in his apartment alone, staring at the ceiling. And in that silence, something rose inside him. A voice, not his mind but his being, whispered, "This is not the end. This is your release." Fast forward 2 years. Jacob now lives in Colorado, runs a mindfulness retreat center, and is engaged to someone who not only sees him, but matches him spiritually. And it all began with that weekend breakdown. Sagittarius, your soul may be guiding you toward your own Jacob moment. And it won't feel gentle. Not at first. Because real transformation often begins with collapse. Think of a forest fire. It looks like destruction, but it's nature's way of clearing space for new growth. Your life right now might be the same. Something old is burning, not because you failed, but because you've outgrown it. Because the universe is clearing away what is no longer aligned with the person you are becoming. You've always been the sign of expansion, but expansion requires space. And space often comes only after something is taken away. What if this weekend's emotional shakeup isn't meant to destroy your foundation, but to show you that it was never solid to begin with? This is the kind of spiritual moment that shifts timelines, that cracks illusions, that reveals where you've settled, where you've compromised, where you've performed instead of lived. And I know it hurts. It hurts to lose what we thought we needed. It hurts to watch something familiar slip away, even when we know it wasn't right. But let me remind you, pain is not the enemy. Numbness is. Denial is. Pretending you're fine when your spirit is whispering otherwise, that is far more dangerous than a few sacred tears. You might feel confused right now, anxious, maybe even ashamed of not having it all together. But hear me, your confusion is not a curse. It's a compass. It's your spirit trying to guide you back into truth. Another Sagittarius woman I worked with named Ria spent years trying to build a coaching business that just wouldn't take off. She tried all the strategies, the branding, the formulas. Nothing clicked. But one weekend, after yet another launch flopped, she broke down, collapsed on her floor. And in that silence, a deeper clarity emerged. She didn't want to be a business coach. She wanted to help women heal trauma through storytelling. It had been her gift since childhood, but she had ignored it because it didn't feel marketable. Now, Ria runs storytelling circles across Europe, with a waitlist 6 months long, because she finally aligned with her soul, not just her ego. This weekend may be that moment for you. The Sagittarius ego loves momentum. It thrives on movement. But the Sagittarius soul, the soul needs meaning. And when life forces you to stop, it's often because it's trying to remind you of what actually matters. So if the relationship ends, if the job dissolves, if the dream begins to feel like a cage, know this: it's not a failure. It's a divine intervention. It's God, the universe, source, whatever language speaks to your spirit, gently or not so gently, removing what no longer fits your path. You're not being punished. You're being set free. And yes, it will hurt. You may cry. You may rage. You may doubt everything for a while. But after that, after the release, you will breathe. You will feel peace again. You will begin to hear your own voice again. No longer drowned out by expectations, by others' opinions, by the noise of performance. That voice will guide you to rebuild. Not the same life, but a truer one. One where your values are your blueprint. One where your joy is non-negotiable. One where your spirit no longer needs to shout to be heard. Sagittarius, this is not the end. It is a rebirth. So let go. Let it fall. Let the storm come. You are not fragile. You are fireborn. And this weekend you will remember just how powerful you truly are, when you stop clinging to what was and start trusting in what could be. The breakdown is sacred. And the rebuild? That's where your light will rise. Gate 2 endings that break you open. Sagittarius, you were born to roam wild across inner and outer landscapes. The mere idea of confinement, emotional, physical, or spiritual, has always felt like a betrayal to your very essence. But what happens when the thing you once ran toward becomes the very thing that holds you back? That's what endings often reveal. Not because you failed, but because your soul has outgrown the container it once fit inside. There's a certain kind of heartbreak that's unique to Sagittarius, one that arises not from dramatic betrayal or fiery conflict, but from quiet disillusionment. The kind where you wake up and realize you no longer recognize the life you built. The relationship that once inspired you now drains you. The dream that once kept you up at night now bores you. And the person you used to be? You've left them behind, but no one else seems to notice. And so comes the ache, the silent knowing that something has ended before the world around you catches up. This is sacred, Sagittarius. It means your spirit is evolving faster than your environment. It means your soul is no longer willing to shrink to keep the peace. Let me tell you about Elena, a Sagittarius nurse from Lisbon. She had been in a relationship for nearly 10 years, a stable, decent partnership with a kind man. But for the last 2 years, she began waking up every morning with a sense of dread. Not fear of harm, not sadness, just emptiness. She couldn't explain it, not even to herself. But he hasn't done anything wrong, she'd tell her friends. There's no real reason to leave. And yet, her body told a different story. Headaches, fatigue, chronic anxiety. Until one evening, as she prepared dinner in silence beside him, she burst into tears without warning. "I feel like I'm slowly dying inside," she whispered. It was the truth her soul had been trying to tell her for months. Leaving wasn't easy. It wasn't clean or convenient. It took months of grief, therapy, and rebuilding. But today, Elena lives in a small apartment filled with light and music and art. She paints again. She laughs without guilt. She doesn't regret the relationship, but she's deeply grateful she listened when the chapter needed to close. Sagittarius, endings don't always come with sirens and slammed doors. Sometimes they come quietly, Sometimes they arrive in the form of a whisper, a restless night, or a sense of being numb where you used to feel alive. And when that moment comes, you must honor it. Because you're not meant to be caged by comfort. You're not meant to stay in stories just because you've memorized the lines. You're meant to live fully. Honestly, brave enough to say, this chapter is complete, even if I don't yet know what comes next. And yes, it will hurt. The mind will panic. The ego will beg you to stay. Your inner voice may scream, but what if I'm wrong? But deeper still, your soul will answer, what if I'm finally right? There is a kind of strength Sagittarius possesses that no other sign quite carries in the same way. It is the strength to release, not out of bitterness but out of truth. The courage to say, I choose growth over stagnation. I choose aliveness over obligation. This is not about abandoning people. It's about no longer abandoning yourself. There was another Sagittarian I worked with, Jamil, a musician who spent years ghostwriting for other artists. His name was never credited. His voice always in the background. He had a steady paycheck, yes, but his passion had withered. The final straw came when one of his melodies went viral under another singer's name. And instead of feeling proud, he felt hollow. That night he walked away. No plan. No backup. Just a prayer whispered to the stars. Let me live my own song. 2 years later, Jamil headlines underground soul concerts across 3 cities, releasing his own music, in his own name. The chapter he feared ending? It was the very thing making space for his legacy. Sagittarius, you too have chapters begging to close. And I know it's tempting to stay in the familiar, to wait until the pain gets bad enough. But let me offer this. What if honoring your truth now prevents deeper suffering later? What if your willingness to leave before the crash is the very thing that protects your spirit? The longer you wait to close the chapter, the more distorted the story becomes. Not every ending is tragic. Sometimes it's the first act of liberation. Sometimes it's how the next great adventure begins. So when the moment comes, and it will, let yourself grieve. Don't rush it. Don't justify it. Don't minimize it. Let the tears come. Let the sadness cleanse you. Let the fear speak its piece, then gently say, thank you for protecting me, but I choose to move forward anyway. Because what awaits you isn't just something better. It's something truer, more aligned, more honest, more sacred. And trust me, when you step into the new, you'll look back not with regret, but with reverence. Because you'll understand, some endings are actually upgrades in disguise. And your soul, Sagittarius, was always meant to fly beyond the edge of what others call safe. Let the chapter close. The next one is written in your own handwriting. Date 3 soul encounters and the sacred mirror of love. Sagittarius, for all your boldness and love of freedom, there is a hidden chamber in your heart that yearns for something deeper than adventure. Something sacred, unspoken, ancient. You may hide it well beneath your humor or your busyness, but you know what I'm talking about. That quiet longing to be seen, truly seen, not just for your light but for your scars, not just for your wisdom but for your wildness. And that's what soul love does. It finds you not when you're most impressive, but when you're most real. You see, love is not always fireworks or faded glances across crowded rooms. Sometimes it arrives as a mirror, a reflection, a voice that echoes your own saying, you're not crazy. I felt this too. And in that moment, something ancient stirs within you. A knowing, a homecoming. Have you ever met someone and felt like you've known them before? As if your souls had a conversation long before your hands ever touched? That's not fantasy. That's resonance. That's spiritual memory. You don't fall in love with their surface, you remember them. This month, as endings reshape your outer world, you may find that love shows up in the cracks. Not to fix you, not to save you, but to hold you in your becoming. Let me tell you about Mateo, a Sagittarius chef from Mexico City. After the sudden passing of his mother, he spiraled into a quiet grief no one could quite reach. He cooked, he worked, he laughed. But at night, he'd sit on his rooftop and stare at the stars, feeling like the most vital part of him had left with her. Then one night he met Zara, a dancer passing through the city on a tour. Their connection was instant but not explosive. It was still familiar. Over tea and long walks, she didn't try to cheer him up or give advice. She simply said, I know what it's like to lose someone who felt like your compass. That was it. In that moment, Mateo didn't feel fixed. He felt held. He felt remembered. Sagittarius, soul love is rarely loud. It's not always romantic. Sometimes it's a stranger on a bus who says the exact thing your heart needed. Sometimes it's a friend who shows up with soup when you haven't said a word. Sometimes it's a whisper from the divine, disguised as a hug from a child. And yes, sometimes it's the love of your life appearing when you finally stop searching. But there's something you must understand. Soul love cannot land in a heart that's armored. It cannot reach you if your spirit is sprinting from the past or clinging to what is no longer aligned. That's why the universe removes the distractions first. That's why it hurts before it heals. You cannot truly receive sacred love until you've made peace with the sacred alone. Another woman I know, Lilia, a Sagittarius healer from Morocco, told me once, "I thought I was heartbroken because my partner left. But the truth is, I had abandoned myself years before he did. His leaving was just the invitation to come home to me. And when she finally did, when she stopped blaming and started breathing, she met someone who didn't complete her, but reflected her wholeness. They now co-lead retreats in the Atlas Mountains. This is the kind of love your soul craves, Sagittarius. Not dependency, not perfection, but recognition. A love that says, I see you. I honor the storm you've survived. I'm not here to tame you, but to walk beside you while you soar. You may already feel it coming. A stranger entering your life with a strange sense of déjà vu. A friend who becomes something more. A connection so real it quiets your fear. Or perhaps it's not another person at all. Perhaps the soul you're meant to fall in love with right now is your own. Because here's the cosmic secret. When you become the mirror, when you look at yourself with reverence, with kindness, with truth, love finds you faster. The more you return to your essence, the more the universe reflects that essence back through others. So if you're still healing, don't rush. If you're still grieving, don't numb. Let yourself be cracked open, because it's through the cracks that light gets in. And sometimes that light walks in wearing human form. Sagittarius, this isn't just about romance. It's about sacred encounter, soul recognition, the kind of connection that doesn't bind you but frees you, the kind of love that doesn't say, you are mine, but whispers, you are safe. If it hasn't arrived yet, trust it will. If it has, cherish it. And if it's only just beginning as a whisper inside your own chest, lean into it. That whisper is not loneliness. It's your soul preparing space for something divine. The kind of love that doesn't complete you, but reminds you that you were never incomplete to begin with. Gate 4, awakening through fire. When the soul is reborn from ashes. Sagittarius, you've always danced with fire. Risked the edge, dared the unknown, leapt before you were ready. But what happens when the fire is not outside of you, lighting the path ahead, but within you, consuming everything you thought you were? This is not a poetic fire. This is soul fire. It burns without mercy, but with sacred precision. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for the right moment. It comes when the time has arrived, when your old self has become too small for the truth of who you're meant to be. For many Sagittarians, this fire begins as restlessness, an unnamed ache, a discomfort that grows louder the longer you try to silence it. It may show up in your job, in your relationships, in your reflection. It whispers, something is off, even when everything looks fine. It's not depression. It's not chaos. It's awakening, but awakening always begins with discomfort. I want to tell you about Cyrus, a Sagittarius architect who built skyscrapers for clients around the world. On paper, he was living the dream, but each new tower made him feel less alive. His creativity dulled. His soul dimmed. Until one day, he visited an old temple in northern India, where an elderly monk told him, "What you build in the sky must match what you build in your spirit." It struck him like thunder. That night, in silence under a banyan tree, he wept, not because he was lost, but because he finally understood. He had built everything outside and nothing within. He left the corporate world 6 months later, and now teaches sacred geometry and architectural meditation to students who want to align beauty with soul. The fire that burned his former identity? It revealed his true calling. Sagittarius, that's the kind of fire you're walking through. Not punishment, not destruction, initiation. Because awakening isn't gentle. The truth doesn't tiptoe. It enters like a storm and rearranges everything. And still, this storm is sacred. You may notice your emotions heightening, old wounds resurfacing, dreams becoming vivid, chaotic, prophetic. You might find yourself crying during a song, staring at the stars and feeling the presence of something greater. These are not coincidences. These are signs, soul tremors, clues that the veil is lifting. You may suddenly feel disconnected from things you once loved. TV shows bore you. Small talk exhausts you. The people around you might not understand this shift. Some may call it a phase. But deep down, you know you can't go back. You've already crossed the threshold. You've already tasted a glimpse of what's real. This is the spiritual fire that purifies your illusions, not to harm you but to prepare you. The you that emerges from this will not be more perfect, but more true, less polished, more present. During this process, you might feel like you're losing your mind. That's okay. You're actually losing your mask. There's a difference. Another Sagittarius woman, Isla, experienced this during a divorce that cracked her wide open. I wasn't just grieving my marriage, she told me. I was grieving the version of me that tolerated so little joy. She spent months alone in nature, writing letters to her younger self, screaming into pillows, praying without knowing what she believed in. But slowly the fire stopped burning, and something else began to rise. Stillness, strength, peace. Not the kind you perform for others, the kind you carry in your bones. This is your spiritual birth, Sagittarius. Messy, sacred, nonlinear, divine. No astrologer, no psychic, no guru can walk this for you. But the universe is not cruel. It always sends guides, books, dreams, chance meetings, signs in the sky. But most of all, it sends you to yourself. So don't resist the discomfort. Don't rush the rebirth. Let yourself fall apart with reverence. Because you're not falling apart. You're falling inward, into your essence, into your soul, into the divine. Your old dreams may burn. Your former plans may collapse. But the life that rises from the ashes will be one only your soul could imagine. And isn't that what you've always truly wanted, Sagittarius? Not just a life that looks good, but a life that feels like truth. Conclusion: the sacred pause before flight. Sagittarius, if you've come this far with me, take a breath. You've walked through fire, faced the mirror, said goodbye to illusions, and opened yourself to divine transformation. Let that land. You are no longer who you were when you first pressed play. This isn't just another spiritual forecast. It's a soul invitation. Into truth, into alignment, into your next becoming. So what now? Now you rest in the sacred pause before flight. The stillness between chapters. The soft inhale before your next leap. But this time you won't leap to escape. You'll leap with presence. This time you won't shine to prove anything. You'll shine because you are lit from within. This time you won't search for meaning in distant lands. You'll find it in the quiet revolution unfolding inside your own spirit. Remember this: your pain wasn't a punishment. Your grief wasn't wasted. Your unraveling was your remembering. You didn't lose your way. You burned the path that no longer served you. Now you rise. And as you rise, others will witness the glow of someone who has truly been through it. Someone who didn't bypass the storm, but danced with it until clarity was born. Someone who embodies the truth that healing is not a destination. It's a way of being. So if these words have stirred something in your soul, if your heart whispered yes at any moment, if you feel more aligned, more alive, more you, then I invite you. Leave a comment. Let me know how this landed. Your story could be the medicine someone else needs. Subscribe to Zodiac Wisdom if you haven't already. We walk these paths together. This is your sacred circle, your spiritual home. And if you feel moved to support this healing work, consider offering a tip from the heart. It helps me continue to create deeper, richer guidance for beautiful souls like you. Your journey is holy, your timing is divine, and your story is just beginning. Keep walking, Sagittarius, with courage in your chest and the stars as your compass. I'll be right here when you return for the next message your soul is ready to receive.